Hey everybody, Hoosier Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking about episode 18 of season 2 of Young Justice called Intervention. Overall, I felt this was an alright episode, but it was very much a plot episode. There really wasn't a whole lot to quote unquote chew on in terms of the characterization going on here. But it is a very important episode, of course, because here we get to see Blue and Green Beetle freed from the Reach's control. So this is really marking a turning point where the heroes can seriously start turning things around. Now, this episode was written by Peter David. We've talked about him before. He's basically the guy who really made the Young Justice comics famous, created quite a few characters who became a part of the lore there. And it's always nice to see him cranking something out, especially these days, since he actually recently suffered a stroke and is still on the mend. So, good luck to him on that. But anyway, let's kind of get right into it. As I said, there really isn't a lot of characterization crunch here, but there are still some interesting things to talk about, like the feint maneuver that Batgirl and Impulse pull on Blue Beetle in El Paso. Now, I don't really think this is probably a tremendous surprise as to what they were doing in that episode. I mean, it was something you could really kind of see coming a mile away. But I still think it was done reasonably well. And I really did enjoy that the characters who were really there to take Blue Beetle down were Rocket and Zatanna. We really haven't seen an awful lot of these two this season. Zatanna had a brief role when it was time to lay out the whole Artemis is really Tigress thing, but since then she's really kind of been off the radar pretty much, which is really disappointing to me because I really love Zatanna. She was one of my favorite characters in season 1. And Rocket is a character from the comics that I don't know tremendously well, but I came away from her with a reasonably favorable opinion. I was really hoping that we'd actually get to see more of her, kind of get to have more of a read on her personality and what's going on with her story and who she is as a character. And sadly, that just really hasn't happened this season, which I have to say I really think is a shame because I do know the basics of Rocket's history and character, and I think we've talked about this a little bit before, but the long story short, I think there was quite a bit of storytelling potential there that they could have really tapped into but didn't. But that's just sort of the nature of this season. Now let's kind of come to what I guess you could reasonably call our main characterization stuff here, and this is the formal breakup of Miss Martian and Lagoon Boy. Now, this I think would have had more of an emotional impact if we as viewers hadn't known that this was really coming for a long time. The only person really who didn't see this happening was really Lagoon Boy. And while he has certainly shown himself to be kind of a jerk and a real hothead and just plain kind of dumb more than once, it's still hard not to feel for the guy. His feelings for Miss Martian are genuine, and the way it all went down, well, McGann really does lay it out best, that it's really just her being selfish and he deserves better than this. And I do like that Lagoon Boy ultimately, he takes it really about as well as you can imagine somebody realistically taking it. He's in no mood to really talk to McGann at the moment, but when somebody dumps you, you generally aren't in the mood to hang around and chat with them. So I had the feeling that he'll probably be touched on slightly before the end of the season, just to kind of show us that he's starting to move on and all that. But I don't really envision too much more storytelling going on with Lagoon Boy here. And I guess if that's the case, and what with the show ending, I have to say that overall this show has succeeded in presenting Lagoon Boy as a fairly solid character. I really know virtually nothing about him from the comics, except that that he was like an Aquaman character who had quite possibly the stupidest name in the entire history of DC Comics, which if you're familiar with some of the olden days stories and characters, is really, really quite the accomplishment. I mean, there was actually a character I came across in a comic who was called an old guy from the 40s and something who was called the Surpriser. I mean, wow. Okay, but moving on. Speaking of characterization, we do get to see that nice little moment at the end there with Scarab and Jaime talking to each other. And I like that the Scarab even says to Jaime, I'd rather be your partner than be a slave of the Reach. Now, we've never really treated here the Scarab as a character, as a personality. I always just really figured it as a machine. It was like a program. It had no desires and wants of its own. And giving us this moment, it really really turns everything that I had previously assumed about the Scarab kind of on its head. It makes what's going on with Blue Beetle and his relationship with the Scarab much more interesting. Before it just seemed like a computer that was programmed by a bunch of nut jobs, which is actually not that an accurate description of the Reach. But by giving the Scarab some wants and desires of its own, it becomes, again, a much more interesting character and situation. And of course, this just makes the fact that the show is getting canned, even more sad, because this is something I really would have looked forward to seeing more. Also, in talking about the Scarab and Jaime and Green Beetle and all that, I like the little the way Green Beetle talks about finally being in control of his body after so many years. This even reminds me a little bit of some stuff I saw from Stargate and Stargate SG-1, from when people who were freed from control by the Goa'uld. I remember there was one where the guy that Apophis had been controlling for 5,000 years was suddenly in control of his own body again. That was a pretty awesome episode. Now we also get to see some really nice info dump of the lore of Blue Beetle and some DC Universe stuff in general. We get to see, Dan Garrett and, of course, the late and surprisingly much lamented Ted Kord. And these are Dan Garrett. I don't think has been mentioned on the show at all. I think there were some vague allusions to Ted Kord and all that, but here we really do get to see that Blue Beetle is indeed a legacy character, just like the Flash, in some ways Green Lantern, and that he does have his own rich mythos. There is obviously a lot more going on with the various Blue Beetles than we ever knew, and I do like that they acknowledge that on the show. Now, obviously, they're not really going to get the chance to go into that in too much detail. I mean, this is Young Justice, not Blue Beetle, the animated series. But again, I do think that they handled it reasonably well, and the idea that Ted Kord was actually ultimately murdered by the Light, rather than, spoiler, in the comics, Maxwell Lord, that's really smart storytelling. That's taking an event well known in the comics, giving it a little twist, and really making it work here on the animated series. So some serious props to the writers on that one. And let's see. Other than that, the only real thing that I really caught my attention was they mentioned that Superboy was out on a date with Wendy. Wendy we have not seen in a long time, and I'm kind of disappointed by that as well. I thought that she and Marvin had real potential to be interesting characters, but I come from the generation of people who did watch Super Friends while they were growing up as kids, so I have some old time nostalgic feelings towards Wendy and Marvin. But still, it was certainly nice of them to give a nod to the character's existence, and there's obviously still the potential for some more storytelling between Superboy and Miss Martian there, so maybe we'll get to see something of that before things come to an end. Anyway, folks, that's all I have for you this time around. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe, and until next time, take care and have a good one.